It's a day that most enthusiasts and Cedar Point fans knew was going to happen eventually. Wicked Twister is not long for this world. Rumors surrounding this coaster's removal have been prevalent in coaster enthusiast communities for several years now, but now they've finally been confirmed by the park itself. Anytime a coaster is removed, it usually brings with it several questions, including the reason for the removal and what could replace it in the future. But with a park the size of Cedar Point, ride removals usually mean that record-breaking is on the horizon. Wicked Twister is an interesting case, however, where the area it sits on is not primed for much expansion. But first, for those unfamiliar, Wicked Twister first opened at Cedar Point in 2002. This impulse coaster manufactured by Intamin was a no-brainer for the park to add, as this coaster model was making waves all across the country at the time. The ride experience is simple but thrilling. Linear induction motors propel the train from a standstill out of the station and into a twisting vertical spike, before the train falls backward through the station and into a second twisting spike. The train would make several passes through the station before the experience came to an end. At its fastest, Wicked Twister reached 72 miles per hour and shot over 200 feet into the air. Something unique about Wicked Twister is that it was the only Intamin Impulse Coaster with twisting vertical spikes on both sides. Most impulse coasters have a twist on one side and a straight spike on the other, usually accompanied by a holding brake, although it's rare to find a holding brake in use anymore. Intamin would not produce another coaster with double twisting spikes until the opening of legendary Twin Dragon in 2021. With the coaster's history in mind, we now have to ask why. Why now, just shy of its 20th anniversary, is Wicked Twister being removed? Reliability could be a reason, but I wouldn't exactly classify Wicked Twister as unreliable. It was running nearly every time I've been to Cedar Point in the past, and the one time it wasn't was due to staffing issues, not the coaster itself. Intamin coasters are notoriously expensive to maintain, and the fact that LIM launches are getting more and more costly to keep running likely contributed to Cedar Fair's decision here. Most newer launch coasters use linear synchronous motors instead. Then of course there's the issue of capacity. Cedar Point gets crowded, it's a fact of life. The park gets slammed in the peak summer months, and lines get long. There's rarely a time I've been there where the major coasters aren't running at least 2 trains, so having Wicked Twister, a coaster that can only physically run 1 train, isn't going to get everyone through the line very quickly. With that being said, at least in my experience, Wicked Twister's line was never much of a line at all, and I rarely waited longer than 20 minutes to ride it in all the times I've been to Cedar Point. The most likely reason for its removal is also the simplest. Wicked Twister just isn't as popular as it used to be. Cedar Point is a cutthroat park, and for a coaster to stand out there, it has to bring something truly unique to the table. As cool as the double twisting spikes were, they just couldn't compete with coasters like Millennium Force, Top Thrill Dragster, and now of course Steel Vengeance. The ridership Wicked Twister had been seeing in its last years most likely didn't justify the maintenance costs. But now, let's look to the future. The plot of land that Wicked Twister occupied is interesting. It is literally beachfront property, but there's not much of it. Wicked Twister was a coaster that was much more vertical than horizontal, so any potential replacement would have to make creative use of the space. Let's assume, for now at least, that the space will be used for a new coaster. There aren't too many coaster models I can think of that could fit into a plot of land like this. The one my mind immediately jumps to is a Skyrocket 2, but come on, do you think that Cedar Point, the roller coaster capital of the world, would add a coaster as heavily cloned as a Skyrocket 2? Most likely not. However, if they wanted to add something new and unique that they could advertise as such, there was that Intamin Lsm Vertical Coaster concept that was announced last year. It's similar to a Skyrocket 2, but would be different enough to fit in with the park's unique coaster lineup. A Mock Ride's Power Splash would also fit in this space, and being located right next to the beach would be a good location for the splashdown. Intamin even revealed their own version of the Power Splash last year, called the Ultra Splash, so either of those could work. I'm not even sure if Cedar Fair is still willing to work with Intamin after the Shoot the Rapids incident. Those two companies don't always get along well. I also remember a couple years ago there were rumors of a GCI wooden coaster going in Wicked Twister's space, but I had my doubts then about it being able to fit, and I still do now. It just does not look like enough room for a wooden coaster unless they expand the beach or install some sort of boardwalk. All this speculation is operating under the assumption that Wicked Twister will be replaced by another coaster, but that might not even happen. Given the location next to the beach, I think the park will use the land for some sort of expansion to the Gatekeeper midway. Maybe add a new restaurant with some outdoor seating and a few more game stands to take advantage of the lakefront property. It's definitely not the most exciting potential use for the land, but it's still a possibility we have to consider. Whatever replaces Wicked Twister, I'm sure it will be carefully thought out by Cedar Fair, which has to make the most of the available space in the landlocked park. Only one question remains: what will happen to Wicked Twister? It's easy to say that the coaster will be scrapped and that's the end of it, but the truth is that Twister didn't have any apparent mechanical failures leading to its closure. It may be expensive to operate, but will Cedar Fair really scrap the coaster, or will they move it to a park that could use a new addition? Right now, the two most likely candidates seem to be Michigan's Adventure and Worlds of Fun, both of which haven't seen a new coaster addition in years. Michigan's Adventure never gets anything though, so Worlds of Fun seems to be the most likely option. California's Great America would also be a good fit, since Wicked Twister has a relatively small footprint, and this park is pretty limited on space. It would be nice to see this coaster get a new lease on life at a park where more guests will appreciate it. Of course, there's also the possibility that Cedar Fair just parts out the coaster to Dorney Park and Valley Fair, both of which have impulse coasters still operating, but that's a worst-case scenario. As enthusiasts, we should always be excited to see what the future brings in the industry, but we also need to preserve the coasters we have now for future generations. Whatever happens to Wicked Twister, I know I'll miss seeing it on the Cedar Point skyline, practically framing the park's giant wheel as the track came up on both sides. I remember on my first visit to the park, I referred to Wicked Twister as Spaghetti Coaster because of its twisted yellow track. It was a coaster that was up against some stiff competition in the same park, and ended up being overlooked by a lot of the guests who visited there. I'm looking forward to see what replaces it and what becomes of the coaster itself, but above all, I'm really gonna miss that sound. Anyway, that'll do it for this coaster discussion. Feel free to let me know your thoughts on Wicked Twister's closure and predictions for the future in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and as always, stay tuned for more coaster content coming soon here on Rampaging Rex Productions.